Hey guys, well, we just got off an amazing conversation with Siim Land. He's a best-selling author. He's been, on a massive podcast tours, just sharing his message of adaptation and being a really resilient human with us today on the call.
Yeah, I mean, he spoke to a lot of things that are very simple and yet really profound. And it was such a great reminder of our innate potential as humans. And because he has an anthropology background, he really gives us insight into our ability and how we are meant to live these lives where we can adapt to our environment and not be victims to it. So it's a really good conversation.
Yeah, I think especially in the world that we're in right now, we keep getting messages that we're not enough, that there's a one size fits all for everybody. And really what he's encouraging is individuality, like know yourself. I mean, these are things that we talk about all the time. And it's so important to keep hearing this message of hope and support and how to take care of things and take responsibility.
So listen to the end. His answer to my last question was really beautiful, and enjoy it. It's a really good conversation.
Enjoy. Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to Health Ignited, another podcast with my lovely wife. It's funny, the last few podcasts we haven't been on together. It's been, our schedules have gotten a little crazy. Summer tends to do that a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, now we're coming back from a vacation too, so we're still trying to find our groove.
Yeah.
Back into work.
That's right. So we've got an amazing guest on today. I've heard Siim on a number of different podcasts. He's written incredible books on all sorts of different aspects: autophagy, minerals, stress adaptation, immunity. We're going to get into some really great conversations. I mean, he's a well-known biohacker. He's presenting this kind of information all over the world and leading seminars. And I mean, it's just really incredible to see how much reach this gentleman is creating in the world and how much he's educating the people that are following him. So Siim, thank you so much for being on the show today with us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and glad to be here.
Yeah, definitely. So we want to talk a little bit about some of the content in your books but basically what I really wanted to kind of pick your brain on is I love that you've got a background in anthropology. And I think that brings in a really interesting, I guess, perspective, especially in the world that we're in right now, because, things seem a little crazy. It's a little hairy out there. And, sometimes we need that sort of longer perspective of, what's gone on for millennia and how are we going to move through this, little blip in the world that we're in right now. And so I'd love to hear like an anthropological, a man from Estonia perspective on a different side of the pond than us. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, well, yeah, it depends on like what the aspect of anthropology, because anthropology itself is many things and involves almost everything related to humans, culture and physiology and society, etc. But from I don't know, like a purely historical perspective, I can say that these kinds of events, these kinds of quote unquote disasters, those things are pretty actually normal in history. They happen all the time, and just almost like it's almost like they're guaranteed to happen. It's just like a matter of when. And in the modern society, like most people don't really have like this kind of, we're kind of been distanced from a lot of these adversities. And it may also just because of that appear to be more serious and more dangerous than it actually is. Let's say compared to the like past pandemics, then this one isn't like nearly as deadly, although it has caused maybe like more economical damage, so to say. So it's almost like the the response to the event has been like more damaging than the actual event, so to say, at least like from an economical perspective. Yeah, it's it's something that we have as a society have to kind of adjust to, and as individuals we also have to kind of remember that like these kinds of things they're happening all the time, and we can't really do much about preventing them. But we can do a lot about in terms of preparing ourselves in advance. Like we can take care of our health, we can take care of our like just skill set in terms of preparedness, and mentally also becoming prepared, so that we would have like at least a bit of like a buffer zone and more of like this advantage when these things do happen, instead of like being completely like surprised.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted the conversation to open up to, because everything that you share, everything that we share on this podcast and beyond too is really about building resiliency. I like to call it resiliency medicine, and really diving into the core physiology of what's been there for millennia. We've gone through all sorts of different environmental challenges, temperature changes that we've always been able to adapt to, and our modern comforts have really created almost like a sort of imagining sort of like a padded room where like nothing, you can't get hurt anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear, when in your work did you decide that, okay, it's time to teach about optimizing your body and creating this adaptation and all the things that you're teaching on, whether it's fasting and, just adapting to stress. Like, when in your studies all of a sudden were you like, okay, this is how I'm going to communicate to mankind that we do have this innate potential within us?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always been interested about it. Like after, like my own personal interest started when I was in the military after high school, and there we were like in the cold and in the rain and swamp and that sort of thing all the time. So that was just because when I was doing it, like I was teaching myself kind of subconsciously how to deal with it psychologically, like different kinds of mindfulness techniques and different kinds of like narrations in my head to kind of cope with the situations. So that was when I was like, okay, this is kind of important, and it's also like powerful strategies that I can use in my everyday life. That's when I personally got more interested in that, and that's where I delved into biohacking, like intermittent fasting, cold exposure, saunas, heat exposure, exercise, breath holds, all these kinds of things that do cause like a small amount of stress. But as you adapt to them, then you can become more resilient over time, which is the process of hormesis, this biological phenomenon. And I've always talked about these topics in my work, but last year when the kind of pandemic started to take over, I also kind of decided, okay, I have like planned to write a book about the similar topic, and now is like the perfect time to do it. So that's like maybe in March or something last year, I decided to, okay, I'm gonna have to write a book about as well hormesis and becoming more resilient.
Yeah, love that. I'm curious, in that time in the military, were you like sharing ideas with like your mates, or like was this sort of just all an internal process that you were sort of self-teaching? Like, I mean, it's phenomenal just to hear that story.
Well, I think yeah, like I did there were some people who dealt worse with it, like they couldn't handle it that well. Like they physically still were able to do it, but they maybe didn't have like the mindset about it that hey, this actually is beneficial. So they were tough guys and they were getting it done, but they were like whining in the process, so to say, like they were having like this negative viewpoint on that. But for me personally, like I didn't like all the things that we did, but at least I was appreciative of the experience, and I knew that it can have like a positive impact in the future in other things that I do. So I didn't, there was always like with between my let's say my closer squad, we were just conversing all the time about these things, and like I just maybe tried to convey them the ideas a bit better as well. Did it work? Maybe it did a little bit for some, maybe, but definitely not for everyone. But yeah, physically, like the human body can endure. It's just like the psychology is the one that like is at the like the bottleneck in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it's such an important message for any time that we're in a stressful situation, whether it be challenges with work or with kids. I mean, we're in the middle of inviting a new pet into our family, and Sonia's having some interesting experiences with what is that going to look like, and we're getting a dog, by the way, and it's a new thing to our family. But this is something that we often talk about. When life is upon you, the circumstances there, how are we going to face it? What kind of mindset and perspective are we going to hold when that crisis comes about? And I think in fear, like most people, I don't think that we've maybe engaged that inner dialogue enough to go, wait a second, what am I actually afraid of? Or how can I show up differently into this stress? So, I'd love to hear some more thoughts on that. Like, so, you were in these uncomfortable circumstances, training for different military excursions, etc. You also have this really amazing, interesting background of anthropology and sort of seeing these longer cycles and sort of integrating all these things together into Sonia's question of like, now seems to be the time that you want to start sharing, because you realize that this is something that maybe you had been expressing internally, and recognize that maybe not everyone holds that same perspective. And so it was almost sounds like a duty upon yourself to share with the world. That's a great story.
Right. Well, yeah, like because you can be like the like, yeah, I consider myself be like very independent and resourceful, and I can handle a lot of things, but that doesn't really what's the worth of it if like everyone else around you isn't able to do it, so to say. So like as a society, as a country, as a nation, or as a culture, you need to have some of these beliefs in the culture themselves, so to say, like some certain set of beliefs that every person would adopt, so to say. So because then the entire society becomes better. And even like in the example of the pandemic, like if more people were to take care of their health before the situation, then a lot of lives would have been saved, and a lot of, let's say, like the transmission rate would also be lower, because of there is like research that obese people or overweight people, they carry the virus a lot longer, and they shed it more, so to say. So yeah, like it's not only like for selfish pursuits and your own personal gain, but it's also for like everyone else around you as well, to be more resilient and more independent yourself.
Yeah. Definitely.
So what does every day look like for you then? Do you have daily habits in teaching others too that they can incorporate into their lives to create that adaptability? Or do you have like seasonal things that you do? Like, just what are some like hacks or habits that you could share with our audience?
Yeah, well, I do some things I do like all the time, yearly. Some other things I do less often. So for example, during the summer, well, one thing that I do all the time is this intermittent fasting, or time restricted eating, that basically I eat on most days. I actually eat just once a day. On some days I eat twice a day. But yeah, like any form of this time restricted eating, where you narrow the eating window, can be like a pretty positive stressor to the body, and helps with a lot of like metabolic health. It increases your, let's say resiliency against hunger levels, and also like makes you less dependent of food intake, and you're less controlled by your cravings and that sort of thing. So yeah, I personally find it pretty useful for like both physical benefits and psychological benefits. And yeah, I think that in a society where like food is abundant, there's like these opportunities to eat all the time. It's very easy to overconsume calories. And with this small strategy, you're like eliminating a lot of these potential situations where you could eat. So it's actually gives you more freedom, and gives you more like agency, because you're like less controlled by these cravings that you may get all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a powerful one. I mean, Sonia and I have been adopting that one for a number of years as well, and I can't imagine doing life without it, really. I mean, there's days where definitely we'll bring in some breakfast, but it's rare. I was just checking out your Instagram feed, and you had this great little infographic showing the red zone and the green zones for what was happening, these different phases through the day, and just having that awareness for people to just know that there's optimal hormonal secretions that are happening sometimes in the morning and sometimes at nighttime, and having that interference with food is a real problem for people, and yet we keep doing the same thing, right?
Can you maybe give us an anthropology perspective on that, just like with human history and how important this way of eating really is?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think like the Paleolithic narrative is that the caveman was always skipping breakfast and maybe eating only once a day all the time. And some days they also definitely didn't eat anything for maybe like a few days in a row. But I think in reality, like it was there wasn't like this specific schedule that they followed. Like they ate whenever they can, and sometimes they probably ate 3 meals a day, sometimes they ate once a day, sometimes they didn't eat anything for 2 to 3 days. I don't think that they probably didn't go any longer than like 5 days at max. So yeah, there was the actual like actual intermittent fasting schedule. The human body has evolved these like this chaotic randomness, so that there is very random meal times all the time, and random amounts of food. different kinds of macronutrient ratios, different kinds of foods depending on the season. So yeah, like it's actually the high variety and diversity is actually one of the I don't know, like the biggest characteristic of the like nutrition that humans ate in the past. And yeah, like with the modern in the modern let's say era, people doing this intermittent fasting, then they have actually like a very like a rigid schedule that they wait exactly until 12 in the morning before they break the fast, and they stop eating exactly at 8 p.m. or something like that. So you know, actually from like a adaptability perspective, it's actually would be better to have like more variety, so to say, create like this randomness and chaos in there. But from a, like a circadian rhythm and health perspective, then this meal timing is actually like a pretty good thing, because like you said, your body has these different rhythms and hormonal secretions, and if you start to eat, you know, at specific times, then your body would you know, prepare for that as well. Like at least your hunger levels would adapt, so you would start to get hungry around those specific times, and your body will also like preemptively start to maybe produce certain hormones like insulin or glucagon, etc., around specific times. So from a health perspective, it actually is a good idea to have like this stable and consistent meal times. But from a like survival or adaptability perspective, it is a good idea to have like some variety and change it up.
So you mentioned intermittent fasting is one of those hacks that you implement. What are some other daily, weekly things that you throw into your schedule?
Yeah, I think like exercise itself is also like a pretty almost mandatory thing everyone should do in some shape or form. I do some form of like physical activity basically every day, whether that be lifting weights, calisthenics, cardio, or some just longer walks, hiking, that kind of thing. So I'll do with something that is like physically, you know, at least get my heart rate a little bit elevated every day. And I think it's a good thing. Other things I do would be also the sauna, so hyperthermic conditioning. That's also been found to have like a lot of health benefits, cardiovascular benefits, as well as like heat tolerance. So you're able to tolerate heat, as well as like exercise. Like you're able to tolerate higher intensity exercise because your body temperature also elevates when you're exercising. So that's like also a good thing for both health and fitness.
Yeah,
and as well,
I'm glad you said that, because I don't think people really, you know, tie those two together. It is a hyperthermic event when you're exercising, especially if you're not just sitting around like doing a rap and then, you know, in an actual kind of way. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, like the plus, you know, the cold is another thing, the opposite of heat. So cold has maybe like it does have like a lot of immune system benefits. Also lowers inflammation. It's great for that. Lowers this arthritis pain, kind of helps with injuries, but it can also be like a bit more like dangerous than the heat. Like you can definitely like have a more negative effect on the thyroid or the stress response by overdoing it. But yeah, I do some cold as well, not every day, because the cold can also be bad for muscle growth and strength gains, because if you like, you know, some of the inflammation and some of the stress that you get from exercise is actually good, and you need to have that, whereas the cold kind of shut it down. So I'll usually do the cold maybe like 3 or 2 times a week, whereas I exercise every day and intermittent fast every day, and the sauna also maybe not every day, but maybe 4 to 5 times a week at least.
Can you define the cold a little bit? Are you speaking to more of like a cold plunge and like staying in there for as long as you can, or ending your shower for like 30 seconds with cold? Like, is there different ways to incorporate that?
Yeah, like the easiest thing to do is just like a cold shower, 30 seconds, 1 minute or something like that. You do get a pretty good response of that. If you start to shiver, then that's already like a pretty powerful response for like increases energy expenditure, activates this brown fat that is good for thermoregulation and insulin sensitivity, and also like helps with immunity and inflammation. But then there's of course like the cold plunge into like a more colder water, and like it subjectively feels like, well, at least like the cold plunge is like hard only when you get in it. Like the initial plunge is the difficult part, and after that you can actually start to enjoy it because you're gonna get used to the cold. So you can stay in there for almost like, you know, several minutes in a row. Whereas the cold shower, then the cold shower is always almost like cold and painful, because like
Yeah.
the stimulus is always new in some sense. So I think like I do like the both for different reasons, but the cold plunge, also is usually you would do the cold plunge a bit longer, maybe like 2 to 3 minutes. In a lot of the studies, they do it for like 10 to 15 minutes in pretty cold water, like 15 degrees Celsius or 10 degrees Celsius, which is pretty cold. But like you don't need to go that super cold to get those benefits. Obviously, if you go like ice freezing, like winter swimming, you would get more benefits. But again, like you can also have like more negative side effects if you do that.
Mm-hmm. Any differences have you noticed for men or women? I mean, I know this is a question you ask a lot, Tanya.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely the potential of women experiencing more of the negative side effects faster or more easily, like low thyroid and stress from that they can propagate it more easily. Not specifically, there's most of the studies aren't gender specific, so to say, like they're done on like a mixed group of people probably. So like, the benefits in benefits themselves are pretty universal, like the inflammation will lower. You would also get like this cognitive boost, like maybe like women who are more prone to arthritis, then they may actually benefit more from like a more frequent exposure to cold. That is like postmenopausal women, because of that's when usually the arthritis starts to kick in faster. But yeah, generally, both can do it. Just kind of maybe the amounts, like women probably have to be more careful with how often they do it and how like intense.
Yeah. I mean, I love the stuff that you're sharing, because I mean, these are such important, relatively simple things for people to implement. I mean, sometimes people think of like the word biohacking and just categorize as something, it's something I can't ever access. And biohacking, I think, is just sort of like, and it's a really interesting way to describe it, but really this is just a way to sort of merge back into how we used to operate in the world. Like we've got this abundance of caloric intake, like you mentioned, in the past that wasn't the case. And so how do we sort of merge our lifestyle practices into those kind of scenarios? How do we get more temperature variation exposure? These are things I think that we have to reacclimatize to in this modern world to be more resilient. So I'm curious, what do you think? I mean, you wrote this a great book on minerals. And, a lot of people get really nutrient depleted, for many different reasons. What do you see as some of those, like, I mean, there's so many amazing minerals, but what do you see as some of the more common things that people get deficient, maybe as a result of our modern lifestyle, maybe, through medication or soil depletion or what have you? But what are some of those like key things that maybe people need to, first start paying attention to?
Yeah, well, I think with the minerals is that, the minerals are important. They're fundamental to like almost every process in the body, and the mineral deficiencies themselves are also pretty common. Like 1 in 3 person has like some sort of a mineral deficiency, or at least like they're not getting the optimal amounts. And there are also like up to 10 of them that can be magnesium, boron, manganese, potassium, zinc, iron, and a bunch of other things, chromium. So like every person has like a different, maybe different mineral that they're not getting optimal amounts of. That mineral, what it actually is, can also be traced down to like the symptoms. If you have like insulin resistance or diabetes, then chromium has been found to be very effective against that, as well as like magnesium. Just magnesium is something that like most people are pretty low in, or at least it's much harder to get it than other minerals, because of like soil erosion, and like most of the magnesium rich foods most people aren't eating. Like people aren't eating like pumpkin seeds, spinach and salmon in that large amounts. And even if they are, then like the actual amounts in those foods are also pretty low. So I do think like a regular magnesium supplement, at least like every once in a while, is a pretty safe thing and easy thing to do as well, to cover at least this one. Blood pressure issues, potassium for sure. Then immunity related issues, or let's say low testosterone, that can be zinc as well as a boron. Or like, for example, like low vitamin D can also be a boron, because boron helps with like almost the like vitamin D utilization. as well as testosterone production. So yeah, I think that's like, you can, like, it's not that hard to cover all the vitamins and minerals, but you do need to pay like a bit of attention to that. Like if you implement a bit of like liver, maybe like an ounce of liver a day, then you can cover basically almost all the daily needs of like a lot of minerals, with the exception of maybe like magnesium and maybe like chromium or boron. Boron as well. Boron you get almost only from like these plant foods, like legumes and prunes.
How much of like the mineral depletion do you think would show up with someone sticking to just one diet? I mean, we talk a lot about diet variation, but like, let's say there's a lot of vegans out there maybe listening, or vegetarians only, or maybe carnivores. Like, what are some of the maybe typical nutrient depletions that you might see and when people are sticking to just one type of food?
Yeah, like I said, like the boron is something found almost exclusively in plants. So like a very carnivore-ish diet or maybe low in boron, and a lot of the carnivore people, they do recommend boron as a supplement. You do get like boron from maybe like bones a little bit, but then you would have to like grind up the bones and eat them, or do like this bone meal type of thing, which most people aren't probably. So yeah, boron is for like a lower carb carnivores. Potassium also maybe on keto, like potassium can be an issue, as well as on like a real strict carnivore, because yeah, you do get a bit of potassium from meat, but the meat would have to be like fresh, so the cooking kind of degrades it. So yeah, with the plant-based side, you're very pretty low in zinc, because of the foods. Zinc foods are almost all animal-based, and the phytates and like the fiber itself also binds to zinc, so that can be, you know, a problem, like a double whammy of not getting enough and also excreting it more, plus iron. So like the actual, you know, bioactive or more bioavailable iron, heme iron, is only in animal foods, and again, like the plants phytates, phytonutrients also bind to iron, which can be a good thing for like a carnivore. So like if you're eating a high muscle meat diet, then you're getting too much iron, which can be bad for like, you know, liver damage and heart disease. So you don't want to get too much iron, and the only thing that like binds to iron is like the plant foods, like coffee or like fiber. Like both would need to be like a more like semi-balanced diet. It's just that they are different kind of things that they need to pay attention to. And with the plants, chromium is also harder to get from plants. You get chromium from mussels and oysters, but also in like small amounts in broccoli and oatmeal. But the problem with chromium is also that it's only like 1% of it is absorbed from dietary sources. So even though you may be getting like the RDA on paper from food, the 1% of that is going to end up absorbed. So you would need to get like a ton more.
I'm happy you brought those numbers in, because often we hear sometimes from patients that, you know, I don't want to supplement. I just want to do everything through my diet. And we're really trying to educate people that we're not living in that world where we can do that anymore, because of all the reasons that you were speaking to before, with the change in the soil, the stresses that we have to deal with, and toxicity and all the various things. So it's so important for people to understand that we're not receiving the nutrients that we could be, and supplementation is so important. So it is important to look at your unique diet and your unique body and your hormonal system, where you are in your life, so you can see, okay, what supplements are going to really support me.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we do in our clinic often too, is we'll run, you know, significant, you know, mineral, vitamin, fatty acid panels to find out. I mean, how could you really know, you know, your absorptive capacity, your microbiome, you know, your digestive lining? There's so many different variables, you know, to the nutrients that you're consuming. All of these things are going to play an important role, and how you're, you know, attaining those ideal levels. So our RDAs really are, I don't even know how they actually calculate them based on, you know, looking at a general population. It's a guess, you know, especially in, you know, north. So like the vitamin D is a great example in our northern sort of climate here in Canada. You guys up in Estonia, I mean, we're going to need more vitamin D than what the RDA is recommending. So, you know, I think to the point of, you know, looking at, we can do all these amazing things for a diet. And Sonia and I really, pride ourselves in eating really well, as do you. And it's not going to be perfect. It never can be. And I think people need to realize that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, I agree completely that there's a big difference between like what's optimal and what's the RDA and what's the like adequate minimal intake, so to say. Like the RDAs themselves are a bit higher than the adequate intake that prevents like complete death. But yeah, like the optimal amount itself is actually sometimes in a lot of cases can be substantially higher than the RDA. So like say, for example, magnesium, then like the adequate intake for magnesium is 140 milligrams a day. The RDA is like 400, 420. But most people may need like 500 usually, or if they're like super depleted, or if they're like insulin resistant, then maybe like 600, even like 800 if they're like chronically depleted of it. So yeah, like there's a big difference between like the bare essentials and what's actually like thriving.
Yeah, and this is we're seeing this in obviously more so over this past year, that we're always trying to look at, here's a one size fits all treatment for everybody, and that's never going to work. We're all too unique in how we express our health or illness, and I think that's it's important to have conversations like this to really remind people that we have to take into our individual approach, and we have to take action on that. One thing that you bring up in what you share is that a lot of these minerals are going to work together. Some are going to support binding of others. Something that is seemingly common for, again, maybe more so women, is just this iron deficiency. Like, what do you see is going on? Like, we live in a very iron rich world. Like, why are so many people iron depleted, outside of like maybe extremely heavy flow for women? But why do you think it's so common?
Yeah, like there is iron in other places. I don't think like most people are deficient in iron, because yeah, you get it from meat, you get it from also the fortified foods, grains, and things. So yeah, like the iron itself needs also like copper for like many things. Like it needs copper for iron absorption, as well as hemoglobin transportation and red blood cell formation. So yeah, like copper is actually, a lot of the cases it's needed, or like the people are actually needing more copper to help with their iron and anemia. So it's actually been known since like the 19th century. So like people who worked in like these copper factories, they had like glowing skin, and they didn't have like any symptoms of the anemia, whereas other people tended to have it. So yeah, like it's actually been known for a long time, but it's observed that copper helps with iron deficiency anemia. And yeah, I think that because excess iron can have like a ton of bad health effects, so you most likely aren't actually needing more iron. You actually need more of this copper that helps with the utilization of the iron. So you get copper from all these organ meats, liver, as well as like dark chocolate, oysters, and those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's another like an Ayurvedic Indian practice is to put water in these copper pots overnight and drinking that water during the day, and making it more of like a daily practice to be able to absorb a lot of those minerals and increase that copper level. And I'm really glad that you brought copper up, because I think a lot of people don't also understand the link between copper deficiency and hormone deficiency, and that estrogen, for example, for women is very much dependent on copper. So it's so important. These minerals play so many roles in our body, and we're not really even aware that the tiniest like amount, like 1 milligram of copper, is going to do so much for our system. So a word that you brought up in the beginning, I think is important to define for our audience, is hormesis. And that aspect of stress and adaptability and adversity. I'd love for you to just define what hormesis is and why it's so important for us to change our relationship with stress.
Yeah, the hormesis is like this dose-specific response to a stressor or a toxin that in moderation is great. It actually strengthens the body, but in excess, it's still harmful. So like exercise, and it's also like there are different kind of shapes for hormesis. Some of them are only good in moderate amounts. Some of them are also good in low amounts. Where some are bad if you get in low amounts and in excess. So like exercise, if you're sedentary, you're not experiencing any stress from physical activity, then that is also like bad, because you're increasing your risk of all these diseases and being sedentary. Whereas exercise can also be bad because of overtraining and injuries. So the optimal amount is somewhere in the middle, like in moderate exercise. Some other examples would be maybe like coffee. In small amounts, it's great. In moderate amounts, is also great. In excess, can also be bad. Although sauna, in small amounts, great. In moderation, great. In excess, bad. So different kinds of stressors. So the idea is that like the body responds to that kind of physiological stressor by boosting a lot of its immune system and different kinds of these defense mechanisms. A lot of these antioxidant defense systems like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, catalase, all those things, they are actually like stress response systems. So your body just tries to deal with the stress, and in so doing, it's like this like a side effect of dealing with the stress, that you're just also improving your health at the same time, and you also like prepare yourself for future events of the similar kind. So that's kind of the entire process of building muscle, as well as strength itself also is derived or based upon that you're experiencing the stress, your body deals with it, or even not able to deal with it, but it does super compensate for that, so that you build muscle and strength, and you can be able to tolerate a greater load in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you talk a lot about using fasting together with exercise. I mean, this is something we definitely talk about a lot too. What are some of the common I notice you like to bust a lot of the myths, like, oh, if I lift weights, I'm going to put on all this excess growth, and I can't do that to my body, so I'm just going to stay sedentary. What are some of those myths that you see people kind of speaking to or complaining about and not really taking action, and how do we sort of quell some of that discussion?
Right. Well, when it comes to the weightlifting and building muscle, is that most people or like you have to be like super dedicated to become like massive, or you would have to take like anabolic steroids. Most people aren't willing to do either of them. So just going to the gym even like 2 times, 3 times a week and doing some sort of resistance training is not gonna make you like look like a bodybuilder. The only thing that is gonna happen is that your bone density improves, your strength improves, you lose a bit of fat, you increase the lean muscle tissue, so you look better. Your insulin sensitivity improves, metabolic flexibility improves. So yeah, like everything would get better, so to say. Yeah, I think there's this misconception or misassociation between like these bodybuilders who take steroids and get heart disease with this regular person who just goes to the gym. Another thing would be with regards to like the meal timing, that you need to have like snacks all the time to keep your metabolic rate up. So there's no actual like science to even prove that a higher eating frequency would increase your metabolic rate, because the amount of like calories you burn for any kind of digestion depends on the total calories of that meal. So if you eat 6 meals, small meals a day, then the amount of calories in those individual meals is smaller. So you'd still burn the same amount of calories if you ate the same amount, ate the same amount of calories as well in like one massive meal or 2 meals. It's just that the amount of calories burned per those meals, 1 or 2 meals, is greater, or it's the same as the amount of calories burned from these 6 meals. So there's no like any like reason to think that a higher eating frequency would be beneficial. Like sometimes, yeah, people overdo it. If they do too much fasting, then they may get like a lower thyroid function and too much stress, and that can be a problem. But in most cases, there's not like a real problem with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. One thing or one feedback that we get from a lot of people is that there's so much information out there, and that there's so much, especially biohacking is just like, it's a popular term now, and they're trying to incorporate this into their life. If you could give our audience, your top 3 tips that they can incorporate, or the top 3 things that you want them to be aware of, so that they can, like, after listening to this, start incorporating that into their life.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, like I think the one that I mentioned, that do some sort of like physical activity every day, like almost like sweat a little bit every day. So that can be like a sauna, that can be like a workout, hiking, or anything else, so that you would experience this physical exertion a little bit. and that can be like that can do like a lot of wonders. Like even like going for a walk after a big meal, that's going to cut the blood sugar response from that meal nearly in half, even like a 10-minute walk. So just walking a little bit, that can be just an amazing easy thing to do. The second thing would be to also like maybe skip the snacks. So if you do eat, whether that be 3 meals a day, 2 meals a day, 1 meal a day, at least don't snack in between them, because that not only like increases the spontaneous calorie consumption, but also just spike your blood sugar. But most important, like psychologically, it makes you like very dependent of these snacks, so to say, so that you're teaching yourself the habit that you're eating all the time. Whereas I would much rather make it this rule that if you do eat, then just sit down and enjoy the meal, have like a nice meal, and chances are that you're like fuller for longer, so you'll experience less hunger from that as well. So you just don't want to snack either. Like the snacking, more often than not, is just like distraction. So you get bored, you want to distract yourself with something, and kind of escape, a form of escapism. So yeah, like I have to actually kind of dig deep into like knowing why you're doing it and what's the actual reason. And lastly, maybe I would say maybe like try to like sleep in this more like a very dark setting. So like we would always, like in nature, we would sleep in complete darkness, but in the like modern world, we have like all these lights and street lights, car lights, screens. Those things are pretty harmful to the sleep hygiene and sleep quality. So yeah, this artificial light at night, which has been associated with things like diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancer, neurodegeneration, because it suppresses this melatonin, and melatonin is like this body's super powerful sleep hormone, but also like an antioxidant that clears the brain from all the toxins, repairs the body, heals it. So yeah, like missing out on melatonin all the time because of this artificial light is at least like in decades is going to have like a pretty pretty bad effect on your health.
Yeah, those are amazing. I think that people, let's say someone gets to a place in their health where they're just feeling totally overwhelmed. There's maybe early onset or heart disease, or there's blood sugar dysregulation, and I mean we're just so taught to there's got to be a pill for that. And we're looking for, and I sort of relate that in my mind to, we're looking for a sprint. We're trying to get to the finish line as quickly as possible. Like, how do we manage this symptom? How do we manage the cholesterol? And we keep forgetting that this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. We're really like, we're optimizing as we go. We're course correcting as we go. We're always making these subtle little changes that we're going to test in our lives to see what kind of impact it's going to have. And I think that, we wouldn't find ourselves so, awestruck when we get some blood markers back from our doctor that go, hey, like this is not good, and you're going to need to go on a med. And I think more and more people are hopefully realizing that they have more control over their physiology if they started to implement the right hormetic responses in the body, encourage adaptability, change the mindset around things. I mean, these are such important conversations. And all of this obviously is going to be related to, a lot of the illnesses that you brought up as a result of not doing these basic things, which, funny enough, are the biggest risk factors for people really struggling with, the next seasonal flu, or, bacterial infections or arthritis or whatever it is. It's just always going to be worse when we're not taking care of those basic things. So in your research for your Immunity Fix book, is there other things that you would add to that list or is there, what are some of the biggest insights maybe that you found? We don't want to give everything away. We want people to read the book, of course, but what are some of those things that you found were important on that side of things as well?
Well, I think like the basics are the most important thing for this adaptive immune system, like good diet, regular exercise, the sauna use is good for the immune system. Magnesium is like a very vital part of all the immune function, but maybe I don't know, like maybe I think it's underappreciated how negative of effects like this metabolic syndrome and diabetes has on the immune system. So yeah, like we know that people who have these comorbidities suffer more from these different kinds of viruses. And yeah, like it's just that the body, gets depleted from the minerals by having to deal with the particular disease, and the immune system itself takes a big toll from that. So yeah, I think that avoiding these comorbidities is also like one of the most important thing for keeping your immune system strong.
That's awesome.
So before we ask our last question, where can our listeners find you?
My website is siimland.com, and I'm Siim Land on all the social media platforms.
Perfect.
Yeah, you got, I mean, just for those listening, you got such great content on your Instagram, but also your website, the courses that you offer, the books. I mean, you're absolutely on a mission to help, wake up the world to their health freedom and their individuality, and to be a more resilient human. I mean, it's such important information. So we're just, really want to commend you on what you're doing. And I know Sonia's got a question for you.
Yeah, so my last question is, in all that you are doing, and if you knew that tomorrow was your last day on earth, what is the impact that you want to leave behind, or what's the message that you have for humanity?
Well, that's a tough question.
I know, it's a big question.
Well, I would say that I would maybe like adopt this is like the Stoic quote, or the Stoic idea of memento mori, which is remembrance of death. So like you have to remember that you're gonna die someday, so that you wouldn't take like your everyday life for granted, and you wouldn't waste it away on like meaningless things. So like make it's not that life is short, it's just that like people waste it on something useless.
That's awesome.
A beautiful
man.
answer.
Yeah, I love that. What was that again? Memento mori?
Memento mori. Yeah.
Memento mori. That's awesome.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Siim, you're just a genius of a man, beautiful human being. You're changing the world, and we're just so grateful you took time out today. I've been meaning to ask, like, what time is it there, by the way?
It's 8 p.m.
Oh, you're good. Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing time with us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.